Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great day today. So I wanted to touch on a topic I've been planning on talking about for a while now. I just keep putting it off, mainly because I needed to sort my own feelings out about it and just kind of figure how I feel about what has been done to the alien universe because of Alien Earth. Um, if you are a fan of Alien, I definitely recommend watching it. Yes, there's some good parts, there's some bad parts, but overall, it is very much worth a watch. Some of the standouts for it are the actors and actresses who play the Lost Boys. Kirsch, Morrow, I absolutely love those characters. Um, but there's a couple underlying issues that I have with what happens in the series. Um, so whenever you're in the alien universe, you understand that there's certain things that happen, but this goes against a lot of them in a way that I can't understand. Um, so let's hop into this. My name is Craigor, and today I'm talking about Alien Earth. When you first start this, you have a lot of good expectations of it. It's in the Alien universe, it's a TV series, so there should be more time to develop characters and what's going on to create a more complete story. Noah Hadley was in charge of it, and he has a fairly good track record. But with this IP, I don't think he quite hit the mark. Um, so the premise of the story is a ship called the Maginot crashes into a different company, the into a different company's um, territory, and it crashes into some buildings. The ship is called the Maginot, and it's been away for like 65 years. And it was a research ship that what they were doing is collecting specimens from all over the universe. So they crash, and that is the the main starting point. Now, for some of the characters, it starts a little bit earlier. Wendy and the Lost Boys, you learn in the first episode that they all were children and they all had something that was going to kill them. Um, there's some implications about cancers and other illnesses, but you understand that they're all going to die. Well, they are somehow selected for a program where they're going to be made into what's called a hybrid. A hybrid is a child's mind in a synthetic body that's an adult. They talk about some of the minutia of it, that they are trying to simulate certain hormones and stuff like that, so that way they can kind of grow and gradually get them into their bodies. Now, there's some other characters in that have some kickback against it, such as Kirsch. He's a synthetic that's owned by Prodigy, which is the territory the Maginot crashed in. The Maginot is owned by Utani, um, which may also explain why the events of Alien actually happened, why they swapped Ash out with the normal science officer, why they made sure to go by that system, um, and end up landing on LV-426. So that could be an interesting tie in there. I don't know if that's what they're going to do with it, but it is a way that kind of solves the beginning of the story. Um, One of the problems I've had with a lot of recent television and movies is they kind of destroyed the magic in seeing a movie. They've tried so hard to make the trailers look so awesome that they end up um, giving away a lot of the interesting aspects. Now, Alien Earth did not do that too much. Yes, they did cover some of the stuff, but they still left it open where you didn't know what was going to happen. But in other ways, they did drop the ball in the fact that they don't assume intelligence of the watcher. Um, Whenever you see older movies, especially like let's use Alien for example, you understood why people made certain decisions. Ash made the decisions he did because he was a synthetic that all priorities were to bring the xenomorph back. Dallas was someone that was he doesn't enjoy the job, he just does the job, and he cares about getting all of his crew home, but he is not he keeps a remove from him and the crew. Um, Kane is obviously more of a type of character that he will do whatever he can to help people. He won't order someone to do something that he's not willing to do, and we see Dallas do that a little bit. But every character makes a choice based on the archetype of that character or of what that character would do, and it all makes sense. Um, and also, we had no idea who was going to survive the movie Alien. Tom Skerritt was top billed, if I remember correct. Sigourney Weaver, who plays Ripley, is the one that survives. So we did not see that before. It was normally, okay, here's the hero. They're going to do this, do this, do this. But then when Ridley Scott did it, he was able to do that. I think part of the reason why he was able to do that so well is because Dan O'Bannon wrote it so none of the characters actually had a gender. They were all they could be played by man or woman, and then it lets the story evolve that way. In this, you knew almost instantly who was going to survive, and it killed some of the magic. It ruined a lot of the suspense for me because you're like, okay, we know these people aren't really going to if this whole group of people, we know they're not going to suffer too many deaths. We know that this person, this person, this person are going to make it, and it ruined the suspense. Even though they tried to make it look like at one point Wendy was going to die, but even when I was watching it for the first time, I'm like, okay, they're just going to reboot her and she's going to be fine. There was no actual wonder if something bad was going to happen. Um, so I'm going to talk about the events. I'm going to try and keep it in order, but I wanted to make this as real as possible. Yes, I typed up a little bit of a script, but I typed about halfway, and then one of my friends, she's on YouTube and Twitch, and she's doing really well. And she doesn't do this kind of content, but she's like, be yourself. Don't try and just read a script. So that's what I'm doing. So starting at um, the beginning, the Maginot crashes into the territory of Prodigy, and by this time, all of the children have been put into android bodies. They are now superhuman in every way. They don't have a natural death. That they're as long as like their batteries don't burn out, they're pretty much functionally immortal. In fact, I think we only see one die in the entire series. They have super strength, super speed, super intelligence. Now, we don't see that as much with them because it is a child's mind that's uploaded into them. They do explain that the reason why it's a child's mind and not an adult mind is because they describe it as an adult mind doesn't fit. I think it's more along the lines of neuroplasticity that an adult mind cannot handle is not flexible enough to handle the change, like that the actual psyche can't handle the change of going from A to B. Whereas for a child, it's a lot easier for them to adapt. Um, so that's kind of the way that I think it. One of the Lost Boys that I absolutely love, Shmi, fantastic character, fantastic acting. In fact, all the Lost Boys, the actors and actresses that played them, did such a good job. I know that whenever, if you watch it and you're not thinking in the mindset that, hey, these are children in adult bodies, it seems kind of cringe. But when you think about it that way, it's so much better, and you see a lot of the and for you see a lot of the reason why they act the way they do, but you see also some of the defects with it. One of the funny parts that I love Shmi is there is a alien creature that's, I believe it's called a T Oculus, that is is small. It's like maybe a ping pong ish size eye that has multiple retinas, and it's got tentacles, and that's how it moves around and stuff. So attacks one of the lost, or attacks Nibs, um, and then they're able to get it off. They throw it onto a table, and he grabs this square container. It reminds me of containers that are used on, like when you go to all you can eat buffets, and they've got the table that heats the water so that way it doesn't burn the food but keeps the food hot. He grabs one of those, slams it on top of it so it contains it, and he's holding it. Mind you, he's got super speed, super strength. His body is also, from what I would understand, would be heavier than a human's. So this is equivalent of like a super bodybuilder holding this container down, and it's fighting. It's banging around and they're trying to get out, and you see him starting to panic, and he looks around and he sees a microscope, grabs it, puts it on top, and goes back to holding it down. That part makes me laugh so hard because it's something that you could absolutely see a child doing. It's like, I'm holding, oh, it's struggling, and not thinking about the fact I can probably bench press a bus. How do I hold this down? Oh, let me grab this 5 to 10 pound microscope, put it on top while I'm holding it, and that will be what keeps it from coming up. So I absolutely love that part. I'm going to talk about some of it. I'm going to give some spoilers, but I'm going to try not to be too bad about it because I definitely recommend watching it. I don't know if this is going to be considered canon or not, but I do think that it is worth a watch if you are an Alien fan. Um, so it crashes, and then you get in, or you're introduced to a character called Hermit. That turns out that Wendy, the main character of the series, who's uh, kind of like the first among equals of the Lost Boys. She was the first one that went from being a child to becoming a hybrid. She's been watching her brother. This so they have like, I think like a 5 minute scene where it's just her watching her brother. Um, so it goes through that. You see the brother and you get introduced to him. You find out he's a medic for a rapid response team that is under Prodigy. He wanted to go to a doctor program. Wendy actually blocks him from doing it because she wants to keep him near so she can see him, so she can watch him, which is kind of an example of the child's selfishness. It doesn't matter that this would be so much better for your brother. It would take him to where you can't see him, you can't watch him. um, so he's a medic for a rapid response team. The team almost gets wiped out when the Prodigy, or when the Maginot flies over their compound and crashes into the buildings. Hermit and his team, they gear up, they get in these big trucks, they go and respond. You can see that the ship is absolutely beyond repair. It is absolutely demolished. Yes, the hull is mostly intact, but its keel is broken. Um, if I remember correctly, instead of the ship being like this, it looks like it's kind of canted in the rear. So that's why I think the keel is broken. I could be wrong on that, but either way, the ship is not going to go anywhere on its own power. So they start clearing the building, then they go into the ship itself. And then we get a better look at a character that we just get a glimpse of, and we don't know exactly what's going on with him. His name is Moro. He is a cyborg. He is a very interesting character. His arm is really neat, but you also realize that they did more later on than just augment his arm. They put some sort of data ports here that you can't see, but he can clip these little things onto to do a download. So they go in there, they start splitting up. Um, in the beginning of the show, you see that they were carrying specimens. In another clip, you see that the xenomorph is now out, as well as a T Oculus. Um, which I think that character really steals the show in a lot of aspects, but I digress. So, you know, there's a xenomorph on the ship. You know that Moro has sacrificed the entire crew to try to keep the xenomorph or to keep the specimens because there's multiple specimens. There's the T Oculus, which is the eye thing. There's a xenomorph. There's multiple eggs. There is a one that looks like a hanging plant but eats people. There are these little flying bug things that apparently eat metals. And there's also some ticks, some space ticks, and just bleh. Um, I know, weird, right? I can handle a chest burster, but the tick things are just kind of. Um, I think there's some other ones in there, but I don't really remember. Those are the real standouts of this group. Um, but Moro's main responsibility is he was in charge of security on the ship, and his whole shtick is nothing else matters but getting these to the company, to Utani. And so when the ship is boarded by Prodigy personnel, he is able to ambush two of them and he locks them in the lab. In the lab, they have, you know, the specimens and all that stuff, but he locks them down in there and he leaves them. Um, there has been some containment issues, and the ticks end up feeding on them, and it's you just kind of watching it, just like, ooh. Um, so yeah, there's that aspect. Whenever you go further down the story, you learn more about Moro's background and all that stuff. But Moro, Wendy, and Hermit are kind of, and it's not the actor's fault. But as much as I like Moro, it kind of ruins the story. These three characters have plot armor so thick that an Abrams tank couldn't penetrate it at point blank range with a saboted anti tank depleted uranium round. Um, it makes zero sense. You're just kind of watching and you're like, why is he not dead? Um, but they have so much plot armor that it's ridiculous, and it's kind of one of my biggest gripes about the entire show is their plot armor. And with Wendy later on, some of the abilities she gains, which doesn't make sense to me as a long time Alien fan. Um, I used to get in trouble in school for reading the Alien book, or sorry, the Aliens books. Um, I in high school wrote like a 23-page paper on the xenomorph social aspects, their hierarchy, the way that they communicate, um, even ways how to stop them from anything from a 9 millimeter all the way up to like larger weaponry. I got an A plus and a note on there that says I need to get out more. I am still a huge fan, but I have not been able to follow it as well as I used to. Um, so if like a lot of the new lore, especially since Disney acquired it, I have not been able to keep up with. So if I miss some things there, please forgive me. Um, I have been reading through the Alien RPG material because I am a fan of that, and I've been looking to get into a game or start a game of it, but that's something else. So um, Morrow leaves those two in the science bay, and then he contacts Utani and says, "Hey, it's crashed. There's containment issues. There's enemies on board, and he's going to try and secure it until Utani can get there." Well, Utani's not coming. They can't because it's in Prodigy territory. Um, Wendy sees that Hermit is there. She goes to the owner of the company, the one that started the whole project, Boyd Cavalier, who's like in his 20s, probably mid 20s. And a little bit of background on it: he founded the company like 10 years before this. He is the youngest trillionaire ever, and he controls, I believe it's like Indonesia and like some other areas around there. Like it's not just Indonesia, but a larger, it's like that region. Um, and the timeline is part of the one of the issues I have with the plot because it feels kind of contrived. So at the very beginning, you see that there's some friction between the crew of the Maginot. And then the next flashback, they show that there is a um, a saboteur on board that's causing all these problems. Then they have later on an episode that shows what happened on the Maginot, and you learn that I did say this is there are spoilers, but I'm trying to make it so you still have some mystique if you decide to go watch it. There's still things to learn. It's not going to just absolutely wreck the entire show, which is probably not the best way to do it. But I was also told that my first few videos are probably going to be crap. So I've done one video before this, and I think like 3 views, and I think I did 2 of them. So the company's 10 years old. The Maginot left 65 years ago. We know that the corporate world, even nowadays, is very restrictive with its R&D aspects. A research ship that is specifically going out there to get specimens is probably the highest level of R&D that they have to get these specimens and bring them back. One quick gripe: I'm not a scientist. I'm not pretending to be. I've worked with scientists in kind of an adjacent thing. I cannot imagine in what universe, well, I guess Alien Earth universe, but I can't imagine a scenario where you would be feeding specimens that are from an entire different planet, different solar system, and you feed them. First off, I don't even think she wears a glove. She may be wearing a glove. So let's say for the sake of argument, she's wearing a glove. She feeds the tick things. She opens up the top of the container and she puts her whole arm into it, drops it, pulls it out, and then closes the little iris that seals the top. And then she eats a freaking sandwich right next to him. If you have specimens like that, you're going to have them in a containment. You're going to keep that area as clean as possible. You're not going to have food. You're not going to have water. She has a water bottle next to it that ends up getting contaminated and causes bigger issues. I can't see that. Like, I could see like some people drinking water or something like in a technological thing where like, oh, we're doing research on computer parts or something like that, but not with biological, because we have people on Earth that are allergic to terrestrial foods, medicines, that if it touches their skin, it can cause a major reaction. Um, and then when you break it down a little bit deeper, when you breathe, whenever you inhale through your nose and you smell something, that's literally particles of that getting into your nose. Now, or that's my view of it, is that if I've got my soda here, if I bring it up to my nose and I inhale, I've inhaled a very, 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 very small amount of the soda into my body at that point. So that way, if I'm able to smell it, that means I got some of it in my nose. We don't know the physiology of these creatures. Why would you bring anything that can be a contaminant in there? It doesn't make sense to me. So that's one issue I had. Uh, Also, I would imagine that anytime they are not directly interacting with a specimen, that they would be. Um, so they've got these canisters and they lock into the wall, and when they lock into the wall, it looks like there is it seals pretty tight on the top and the bottom, so it would fit like that. It just slides in and it's locked in. Um, but they just leave this one on the table, and it doesn't make sense to me why you would do that. If you spent 65 years of your life doing this, isn't it worth putting the specimen back in containment rather than just having it sitting there on the table while you eat your sandwich and drink your water? It it would make sense to me to you do what you need to with the animal, and then you store it. You want it, you would want it to be as secure as possible. That's not what we see here. And then we know that there's a saboteur on board, and the saboteur was paid by Prodigy. This doesn't make sense to me. Prodigy is 10 years old, which means that they'd already been out in space for 55 years when the company was founded. Let's say that the company was founded, and in the first year, that's whenever it became super big. And then after that is whenever they had enough money and stuff like that to be able to start getting intel on some of the bigger corporations. I would imagine that the research mission would be highly classified. The ability to contact that ship would be very hard unless you were a corporate. We know that this is one of the few ships that we've seen in the Yutani or in the Alien universe that during this time frame that there's actually a set um, security officer. Like, we haven't really seen that in the Alien universe as far as I can remember, and in this kind of situation. Heck, even the Nostromo did not have a security officer on board, and it was pulling tons of materials. But I guess because that's a space trucker, I guess that kind of makes sense. But this is a research vessel. It's got all this stuff on it, all this investment, and has a dedicated security officer on board. I would also imagine that Mother would be looking for any incoming and outgoing messages to make sure that if someone was trying to share information, that it was going through the proper channels. So it is very confusing to me how they are able to turn someone. And then from the understanding, they said, hey, we're going to make you rich. We're going to turn you into a hybrid, which means that you have a synthetic body and you'll live for the rest of eternity. This company's 10 years old. All the information that they would get on that ship would be filtered through Utani. They don't show, as far as I can remember, they don't show them watching like a news feed that talks about all this. Everything would be coming through that. And you'd also have to imagine there'd be a delay in time between transmission. Um, because we know that they can, I think it's tachyon shunt drive, that they're able to go faster than light. But I mean, even the Nostromo wasn't able to do, or at least we never saw them try, I think, uh, to do a live communication with Earth. They didn't do that at all. They talked with Mother, and Mother told them what to do based on its parameters. So I have to assume that FTL faster than light communication is limited. So how would they be able to convince someone to turn against the company? And how would they convince this person that, well, how would they contact them? How would they even begin to convince them that they can do what they're saying they can do, as well as protect them from Utani? It doesn't make sense to me. Um, a small gripe. I I do enjoy the form of the xenomorph. However, a lot of times the xenomorph looked a little, not a little, it looked pretty rubbery in a couple scenes. And that bothered me a little bit. Um, so the teams are going through the Maginot, trying to secure it, trying to find survivors, stuff like that. And while they're doing it, you can see that if you look in the background a couple shots, you can see that the xenomorph is stalking them. Doesn't attack during that time, is just stalking. Wendy, who is able to convince Boy Cavalier to go to, or is able to convince Boy Cavalier to let her and the Lost Boys participate in the rescue mission on the Maginot. So at this time, we don't know that he knows what's on the ship, but he does know what's on the ship. And he's sending synthetics with the minds of children into that. And his only assurance is asking Wendy, "Can you take orders?" And she goes, "Yes, we can." That makes zero sense to me. These kids, these lost boys, are literally you showing that you can do this. These are not the beta tests. This isn't the thing. These are the actual prototypes of them. They're doing it for the first time to see if this technology works, if it's worth doing, if they can learn from it to possibly do what I would assume to load an adult mind into it later, because then they can go to some of the richest people or some of their own higher ups and go, "Hey, do you want to live forever?" Sending those platforms out into what he knows is on that ship makes no sense. But he lets them do it. So they go out and they fly over there. Oh, little thing. So whenever they get permission to go, Wendy runs to a room and she's got a paper slicer, the old school one where it's got the base and then it's got the blade. You lift it up, you put the paper in, you pull it down, it cuts the paper. She jerks the blade part off. Now, I remember when I was a kid seeing some that were made of metal. I remember seeing some that were wood. with a little strip of metal, and now I've seen some that are plastic with this little strip of metal. As time has moved on, they've moved more into plastics, stuff like that. She grabs hers, jerks it up. It's got a Tonto tip on it, which doesn't make sense to me. A Tonto tip is like what you expect to see on like a katana, where the blade comes to a point like this, rather than the blade like this and the blade like coming down like that, like on a kitchen knife or a hunter's knife, stuff like that. This one comes to a point like a katana. At least that's the way it appears to me, and it makes zero sense. She then slaps it onto her back and it sticks. That I can deal with because I would assume that they are using some sort of wireless technology to charge them. And considering we know that from a comment that's made that their bed is their recharging station, anytime that we see them laying in the bed, they're laying flat on their back. I assume that on their back is where the coils are for the recharge, and I assume that it is something along the lines of like how MagSafe is. So I guess I can kind of buy the slapping on there, sticking. It's a little reach, but I can get it. So there's that. And so then they end up going. And by the way, the commentary of the scene before she goes and tells the other Lost Boys they're going is hilarious. Me, or maybe we just like run out of battery one day. It's like, I freaking loved it. It appealed to my inner 13-year-old, or as I've been told, I have yet to get past 13 years old, which I'm okay with. So they get to there, they fly in, and they're helping secure things, or not helping secure things. They go in. Kirsch is a character that I really enjoy because it's almost like put in someone was trying to make a very practical, neutral morality character that had all the wisdom of the ages, but none of the human view of that philosophy. I would love just to sit down and talk to him one day. Like I love his character, the way that he looks at things. Um, but so they finally go in, and Kirsch takes most of the Lost Boys because, if I remember correctly, Wendy runs off just to go find her brother, which means she's not following orders. But I could be wrong about that. Uh, that she got permission to run off. I'm pretty sure she didn't. Um, so Kirsch and the rest of the Lost Boys go try and find out what's on the ship. They find the lab. Um, and we see that one of the characters, it is Toodles. One, like at the beginning of the show, we see that he goes, "I want to be a scientist." Um, Toodles is kind of looking at this creature that's hanging from the ceiling. It looks like a floral bulb uh, before the flowers opened, and he's kind of looking at it and studying it while Kirsch takes the rest of them to go check out the lab area, and he's learning about what's going on there. And Wendy ends up finding her brother. She's like, "Hey, it's me, your sister." I can't remember the little girl's name before she became Wendy. Um, and he asks her about some stuff, and she remembers it. And so he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's my sister." Um, that's, I guess I can kind of see it, but seems a little bit of a reach for me that someone would believe that quick. Um, but moving beyond that, Um, two of the guys end up, or two of the Lost Boys end up finding the eggs, and then Moro shows up. Moro is able to deduce, I'm pretty sure, just by seeing how the eggs react and how they interact with each other, that he thinks he's like, okay, these either have to be children in adult bodies or they're really stupid. Um, and so he kind of deduces a little bit about what's going on. I don't think he gets a full picture, but I think he gets a general idea. Although I think one of them might confirm that they are. I can't remember. I haven't watched it in a couple of weeks. Um, so they find the eggs. Hermit gets near them. They start reacting. Uh, Moro does a download of all the information. And then Hermit gets kidnapped by the alien. And Wendy goes to chase after him. Hermit ends up surviving. We see him later on, but there's just so much plot armor that it's doesn't make sense. We see the alien in the Maginot, even though there's eggs nearby, slaughter people that aren't even fighting him. That doesn't make sense for the xenomorph. The primary purpose of the xenomorph is to capture, collect, and take them back to a hive, take them to some place so they can be implanted to propagate the species. That is not what happens. He just slaughters the crap out of them. In fact, in one scene, we see the xenomorph kill like an entire party, and then and he does it in seconds. Like I think it's like under 15 seconds, slaughters an entire party, and then we see him wipe out a entire squad of the rapid response team. They're fully armed, they're kitted out, and then at that point, Moro's there. They had captured Moro, and it leaves Moro alone. It just kind of gets close to him. You get a kind of a sense that he's kind of checking him out, and then he just leaves him. But we see on the Maginot almost the same exact thing, but it kills the girl. That's it doesn't make sense to me. Um, but that's kind of like the beginning points with that. As I said, I don't want to break. I don't want to give too much away because I do want you to watch it while voicing some of the issues I have with it. And this this one part doesn't make any sense to me. So expanding on the lab stuff. So Prodigy gets all the specimens. They put them in a lab. I think there's a keypad lock. We see in the first episode that Wendy is able to hack just about anything. She is able to go ahead and hack their system to follow her brother around and stuff like that. And they're like, we didn't make her so she could do that. She just taught herself how to do that using the stuff she has. So we know they have the ability to hack. You have this lab with priceless specimens that have the potential of trillions of dollars in R&D. They don't have a guard there. They don't have a lab tech that is required to be in there at all times. They don't have any kind of access control except for a keypad. In a facility that has children's minds in synthetic bodies that we know that they can teach themselves to literally hack the entire Prodigy system. That makes zero sense to me, which is what causes some of the issues later on. Um, they also don't have kill switches on any of the hybrids. This makes zero sense to me. You know how volatile kids can be. We understand that there is a dissidence between the mental capability, and they are trying to fine tune the hormones, the simulated hormones in them. So children are already volatile. Their hormones are now also imbalanced. We see one character that has a mental break where she says she's pregnant. She grew up on a farm. She understands the reproductive cycle of mammals and understands she is not a human anymore, but still knows she's pregnant. She is not pregnant, by the way. She is a synthetic. And as far as anything the show shows, she has not done anything with anyone that should lead her to believe that she's pregnant. So we see that mental break. And she leaps at one of the characters, and we know that she has the ability to kill her in an instant. And they had no way to stop it. They had no way to lock her up or lock up her system so she can't move. They didn't have a kill command, they didn't have a shutdown command. What ends up happening, the Madam Sylvia, I think is her name, ends up like, okay, I'm gonna make some tea. Do you want some tea? And goes over to the counter, hits her panic button, which is by her tea, not in the chair she always sits in, but over by the tea. The soldiers come in, and I don't even think it's really a panic button. It must be a call button because the soldiers come in, but when they come in, they don't seem to be overly concerned. They appear aware, they appear to be vigilant, but they're not coming in like ready to go. They're like they're coming in ready, but they're not seeing um, Nibs as a threat. They know that she could be, but they don't come in with weapons drawn. Um, well, they have their rifles, but they're not pointing them at her. Is what I'm trying to say. And then she's like, take her back to her room, protocol or code, whatever. And so what I assume is they take her back to her room, tell her, okay, you need to lay down to recharge. She lays down, and then when she's in the bed, they do something to her head. So we see this happen. We know how strong they are, how fast they are, and we know that they are very volatile. And nothing is done to try to correct this. They don't have, they don't develop any way to do it. The most we see is one of the other characters who turns out to be a synth that we didn't know was a synth, is able to uh, cause Wendy to lock up for a few seconds before she ends up overcoming it and locking them up. Uh, and then we know that there is going to be another season. With what happens at the end of the series, of season one, sorry, one of a few things has to happen. Prodigy gets completely destroyed, every bit of it. At the very least, um, Neverland Island has to be completely wiped out, whether it's some sort of virus that wipes out an EMP, something along them lines. Something has to happen to shut down everything that's going on there and wipe all knowledge of it. Because if they found out what happened with the hybrids, I think that the general outcry would be enough to prevent synthetic research from continuing, um, because the trust would be gone in them. I think the highest that we would see them go is to be something like a Working Joe from Alien Isolation or Aliens Fireteam Elite. I think that's the farthest we'd see them go. I don't want to spoil too much of that. I know I spoiled it a little bit, but I don't want to. I want you. I know I'm talking about all these bad aspects of it, but I truly want people to see this. Um, so now that I've just said that, my biggest gripe about this entire series, but by what it represents, is what it's done to the xenomorph. So, in the books, in the comics, and all that stuff that I've learned from whenever I used to get in trouble reading about it, it was understood that they used pheromones and some form of telepathy in order to communicate. Yes, I understand that there are different strains of the xenomorph. I've read Prototype, and I've read was it Cryptus, and I've read like two other books, so I understand there's different strains. The Alien RPG talks about it, but this strain, for lack of a better term, makes no sense. And I guess it would also negate my theory on this is how they found out about it for Alien, the movie, 1979. Um, this strain will respond to verbal commands. Wendy is able to first hear them. And I was like, okay, this is an interesting aspect. She can hear something about them, whether it's some vocals, sub vocalization, whenever they're just doing their thing that they give off and they don't know about, or maybe it's just something about their respiration. I don't know. I thought it was just kind of interesting. It's like, okay, so they can use Wendy to detect when one is nearby. That's not where they went with this. They made it into where she listens to it, she understands that there's a language, and she talks to them. We get an idea of an actual conversation going on between her and a chest burster. Now, this does raise some interesting thoughts on it because that would mean that xenomorphs don't just have instinct, they have full blown genetic memory, that they are able to remember things that happen to their progenitors. Because if you are born and you absolutely understand a language from the get go, there has to be other bits in there. A language is very complex. There's a lot of, there's just so much that goes into it. And so that does raise an interesting aspect. I think it's one of Dan O'Bannon's original ideas, where that the xenomorph was part of a very advanced civilization, but these are young ones that um, they hadn't developed to the point where they come into like an intellectual awakening or something along them lines. It's back whenever it was the pyramid that they went into rather than the ship. But let's go past that. She sits down and she talks to a face hugger. The face hugger gets out of containment and she's able to sit there and talk to it, where it stops trying to run and it's listening to her and they're having a conversation back and forth. It's making vocalizations back at her. And then later on, we see that she's able to communicate enough to direct the xenomorph as if it is an attack dog. I don't buy it. It doesn't make sense to any of the information I have. Yes, I do know that a lot of the books that I read, because they came out in the 90s, that a lot of it is now considered like second or third tier canon, So the guy who did I can't remember his name right now, who who did all the lore and set up for Alien RPG, stated that they're not getting rid of any of the canon. But basically, the way that it goes is one is one happened. There's documentation. We've got proof that this happened. Next here, you're hearing it from a friend. So yes, the broad strokes are correct probably, but there's things that they have wrong. And then there's third tier is whenever you're in a bar and you just hear the story from someone, like an old wives' tale, or that back in my day we walked uphill both ways type thing. So I do appreciate that they did that. But in this aspect, this doesn't work for me. Um, I understand that I could be absolutely wrong about this, but I don't think I am. I firmly believe that Alien Earth must be an alternate universe in the Alien franchise. Because even when Ripley, who had Ripley 8 in Alien Resurrection, had Queen DNA, she did not display anything like this. And if anyone was going to be able to control them to this level, it would have been her. Yes, I do know that there's been instances that there are a group of predators that's able to control the aliens and use them as attack dogs. But if I remember correctly, they specifically say they used either actual queen pheromones or simulated queen pheromones to control the xenomorphs that they had. I don't remember anything about vocalization. So those are some of my gripes. Um, I really did enjoy a lot of the aspects of the Lost Children. As I said, they had some great things about them. The actors and actresses did fantastic with them. Kirsch is an interesting, nuanced character. Morrow is the deepest character that we see in there, and we see kind of what happened to him that made him into what he is. And I think that we see them. It's kind of like a version of like H.P. Lovecraft, where instead of seeing a character come into becoming a hero, we see the descent of not into madness, but of his personal morals. That he became more and more and more into becoming the ultimate type of agent for Utani. Um, but these are some of my thoughts. The set designs were absolutely fantastic. When you watch the scenes from the Maginot, you absolutely feel like that they plucked 1979 sets and threw them in there. And it worked so well. They did lean a little too hard to the nostalgia as far as showing like the opening of the pods and stuff like that. The set designs worked well. The broad strokes, so the way that there's new corporations and stuff like that that we don't hear of, them expanding on some of that, talking about which ones control which area, is fantastic. I always enjoy them adding more lore, especially to the companies. But as I said, with some of the issues I have, those are my issues. Um, but I did enjoy watching it. I've seen it probably like 5 times. Um, I'm going to be watching it again. I am planning on releasing this on Alien Day, which is 4/26, which is this coming Sunday. We'll see if I get to it or get it released by then. But overall, I did enjoy a lot of the aspects. There was a lot of things I thought was fun about it, but I did have those gripes, and it broke the immersion for me. Um, One little thing that I thought was really neat was Wendy, where she talks about she misses eating. I am I I'm a rotund guy, And if I got put in a synthetic body, I would be very sad that I couldn't eat because I'm a comfort eater. I enjoy it. Um, and then it's kind of interesting because there's a scene later on where they have these things. They look like little Listerine strips, like those little containers for it, and they can put it on their tongue. They can pull one of the strips out and put it on their tongue, and it simulates the flavors of like chocolate and stuff like that. I thought that was really cool. Um, but this is one of those stories that I enjoyed a lot of the characters, but there was a few things that just didn't fit with me. So let me see real quick if there's anything else. Okay, so I do recommend watching this. It was fun to watch. You have to kind of go into it with a popcorn show format and understand that things may not make sense to our current view of the alien, the xenomorph, and all that stuff. I do like that they introduced new aliens. The T Oculus absolutely stole the show in several aspects. Um, and I really think that is worth a watch. Even if you were on the fence about it, I highly recommend you watch it because even if you have some of the issues that I have with it, as I've said, I've watched it 5 times. We know there's going to be a second season. And with the way that they do things, I would fully expect for there to be some sort of stories or canon that branches off of this. So, at the very least, if you are an Alien fan and you think you're going to be watching some of the stuff in the future, I do recommend giving it a watch. There were some very interesting aspects to it that I did enjoy. I know this mainly focused on the negative things, um, but if I get some people that say they want me to write about a lot more of the things that I like and give more examples, I can try and do that. But it's mainly the acting and the way the characters are presented as children in adult bodies. And Kirsch and Morrow. But I'm going to go ahead and in this video here before I ramble on too much longer. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you want to tell me how wrong I am, I'm more than open to that because I love learning. Um, anyways, I hope that you have a great day. Hopefully, I hope you're having a great alien day. Um, for those of you that don't know, 426 is Alien Day in reference to the fact they land on LV 426. So 426, 426 became Alien Day. I hope that y'all have a fantastic day, and as always, be well.